My first question is, what is one thing that you do for the photographic process that has saved you time?
Photographic process. Now, is that within the process of like literally making the image, or would you like me to focus? Yeah,
making the image.
Yeah. The process of making the image was, I would say, the biggest shortcut for everything. This may not be the case for everyone, but for me, it was like a light bulb moment, was embracing live view with DSLR cameras. That happened years ago for me. Obviously with mirrorless, you have no choice but to embrace sort of live view because there's no optical viewfinder. But that was 2015, maybe 14, the Nikon D4 was the first DSLR that live view was fast enough and responsive enough that I was actually manual focusing most of my shots still because the autofocus just wasn't there yet. But pre-visualizing the bokeh, the exposure, of course, and just my framing. You have to think about it this way. Like when you have the optical viewfinder up to your eye, the relative size of where, like the amount your eye has to traverse is kind of huge. It's almost like you're looking at a giant movie screen, like a theater or something, where you really kind of have to, like, not literally turn your head, but you really have to look up in the upper left corner to get to the corner and then traverse all the way down. When you pull back and just look at the tiny little live view screen, a foot from your head, you see, the resolution is less and it's a little harder to tell if it's actually in focus maybe, but you get a sense of the composition, I think, a lot easier than you do when it's right up in your face. So embracing live view early on, which now basically virtually everybody does if they shoot mirrorless, saved me so much time just in the iterative process of like knowing what I wanted to change right there in the moment, as far as getting rid of something in my composition, positioning it a little bit better so a sign isn't in there, or whatever it is, getting a read on the light. All of that happened, again, just like a giant shortcut for my brain by embracing live view. And I do miss the optical viewfinder for some things in some situations. It'd be great to have a hybrid solution with a full frame mirrorless camera. I don't think that exists anywhere yet. Fuji's the only one I'm aware of, and they're all cropped. But yeah,
exactly. I was about to say that.
Yeah, but embracing that early and just riding that wave now it's like a dream. You don't even think about it as like, oh, what was life like before this? But there was life, and it wasn't as grand. It was so much more tedious. Yeah.
So if you had to put a percentage on when you do a wedding, your average wedding, how much of it are you looking through your electronic viewfinder versus pulling it away and looking at the screen?
So this has rapidly changed in just the last month because of the Canon R3, which I just published my full review about. I made about 25,000 frames, which didn't take long because that thing freaking flies. My God, I take so many pictures with it. But I would say pre-R3, so I was shooting the R6, R5 briefly, and then the EOS R for the longest amount of time. 90% of the time, the flippy screen. Out in front of me at an angle closer to my waist or something, which I actually love because it's by default, your perspective is more interesting than everyday life where your eye level is. So that's a huge benefit. But with the R3, the eye control autofocus, the ability to move your autofocus point by just looking, it tracks your pupil, and where you look, it physically moves the autofocus point. That is so much faster and has such a natural feel to it that I find myself now coming back to the viewfinder. And the perspective may not be as by default as great. It's also fine for a lot of situations. It's not like you always have to be at a completely fascinating angle or extreme angle on things. It's fine at eye level, and it's so fast and intuitive and smooth that I'm now working my way back to that. So it's a balance between both, I would say. And I find myself, seriously, the eye control is so good that when I do have the flippy screen down at my waist or whatever, it's slower and a little bit more frustrating for it to not just focus where I'm looking. I want it to somehow track my eye from this distance. It's so good. I mean, you could just touch the screen, but I've never actually enjoyed the touch.
I never liked that
it's
either.
Awkward and not. It's bleh. But anyway,
So you could start squatting to get to your natural waist height.
Yeah, I could walk around like a crab. I mean, honestly, I used to lay down a lot for like more creative angles with couples portraits where I knew I didn't have to run over to catch a moment or something,
Right.
where I had more control. I would just lay down on the ground, totally flat, and look through my camera viewfinder that way, especially with the Nikon cameras, because they didn't have a pull-out screen until the D750, I think. So you kind of had, if you wanted to see at all what you were capturing, you really had to lay it down on the ground with it, which, honestly, though it was annoying because you would get dirty and it was like a little bit more painful or whatever, you do win over some client, I don't know the word. They just get a little more invested in what you're doing because they see you physically be like working harder. There's something to that for sure. When you're just like walking around like, yep, okay, photo's done. They don't even realize you've made it. Like, yeah, you'll get the natural expressions, but they may not realize how hard you're working. There's something you gain by being, the physicality of shooting is something you have to think a lot about because it impacts your subject so much.